As educators, our work is demanding, and if we don't build up the inner resources to deal with those demands, we can become depleted. I'm Julie Hassan, author of Pause, Ponder, and Persist in the Classroom, How Educators Turn Challenges into Opportunities. In the first two videos, we talked about pausing and pondering. Now, pausing and pondering are practices. They require intention, effort, and a great deal of persistence. In this video, we're going to talk about persisting. And one of my favorite examples of persisting is Mrs. Pope. If we've known each other for a while, then you know I collect stories people tell about their most impactful teachers. And the story of Mrs. Pope came from a man named Marcus. Marcus and I were volunteering together in a food bank, packing boxes of peanut butter when we started talking about our work. When I told him I'm a researcher and I research teacher impact, he shared this story with me about his favorite teacher, his high school home economics teacher, Mrs. Pope. He said he loved home economics because they often cooked, and he remembers this one particular Friday when they made chocolate chip cookies. He said Mrs. Pope gave a clear direction. After the cookies cool, you can each eat one. Marcus said he knew Mrs. Pope saw him put 3 more cookies in his pocket when she asked him to stay after class. Now, Marcus expected Mrs. Pope to lecture him, maybe exclude him from cooking the next time, maybe even write him a referral to the office. But instead, she asked a question. Are you hungry? And he said he was. He told his teacher that his father left a couple months ago. His mother wasn't doing well. The electricity had been turned off in their house and they didn't have much food. Yes, he was hungry. He remembers his teacher, Mrs. Pope, standing there and looking at him and then looking down at the spots on his shirt. And then she said, you know, Marcus, there's a wash machine and dryer here in the home ec room. Why don't you bring your clothes in? You can wash them here and you'll have something clean to wear. So the next morning he brought his clothes and dropped them off. And when he came back to get them after school, Mrs. Pope had neatly folded them, and Marcus said he remembers they smelled so good and he was so grateful to have clean clothes. But next to that pile of clothes was a big brown bag with his name written on it. He looked inside the bag and he found cans of soup, crackers, snacks, all kinds of things to eat. Marcus told me that his clothes were washed in that home economics classroom more times than he could count, and Mrs. Pope and the ladies in her church group were the only reason he ate most nights. And when I think about this framework of pausing, pondering, and persisting, I have to think about Mrs. Pope, because when she gave the clear direction and she saw Marcus take the extra cookies, I'm sure she felt frustrated, disrespected, maybe a little angry, but somehow she paused. She probably took a deep breath. She regulated those emotions. She reappraised the situation. She pondered. She asked herself some questions. What's really going on here? She probably pushed aside all the assumptions she could have made, that he was a thief, that he was greedy, that he was impulsive. And instead she asked a question. Are you hungry? And because she paused and pondered and asked that question, she changed the trajectory of this man's life. And when he finished telling me the story, he said, you know, Mrs. Pope is gone now, and I can't thank her for her kindness, but I try to pay it forward by volunteering in the food bank. What an impact she made. He's still honoring that impact years after she's gone. And I think she had this gift of managing emotions and looking at challenges and figuring out how to turn a challenge into an opportunity with a student like Marcus in her classroom. And she had to have persistence. She spent a year helping him get back to a place where he felt empowered and move towards this trajectory of success. But she also had to have strong resilience herself. In this video, I want to talk a little bit about how we build that resilience, because there are things we can do to become more resilient. And what I want to talk about first is accepting, avoiding, and advocating. We have to accept the things we can't change if we're trying to build that resilience. There are so many things in education right now that are frustrating, but outside of our control. Our sweet spot is that intersection between what really matters and what we can control. And that's exactly what Mrs. Pope did. She understood what really mattered. Feeding kids' bodies, minds, and souls mattered, and what she could control. There was so much about Marcus's situation out of her control, but what she could do was wash his clothes. What she could do was get the ladies in her church group to help her feed him. She focused on that sweet spot, and it had to feel satisfying for her. It certainly made a difference for Marcus. Accepting what we can't control can keep us from wasting our energy and bring us a sense of peace. Now, sometimes the stressors in our lives are brought on by us. So, if watching the morning news is causing you stress, turn it off. If there are certain people in your life who bring some stress, see if you can limit your time with them or avoid them altogether. There are so many stressors in our lives that we can just avoid and lower our stress. But we also have to advocate for ourselves. We have to ask for what we need. We have to express what we want. And by accepting, avoiding, and advocating, we can really build up some resilience and manage some stressors. And by focusing on things that bring us gratitude and joy, we can help balance out some of those difficult things. I worked with a teacher once, her name was May Simmons, and she always had this positive energy. She always seemed so happy to be at school. And one day I asked May, "What is your secret?" And she said, "When life gets hard, play harder." I realized May was right. And in schools, we're in the best place we can be to play. We're surrounded by kids all day. I remember May playing double dutch out on the playground with the kids and the jump ropes. Young people, if you don't know about double dutch, Google it after this video. It's pretty amazing. And inspired by May, I started to ask myself a question. How can I add a little play into my day? Now, I worked at a school with long hallways, and I remember when I was walking into that hallway and there was a colleague or a student next to me, I would quietly say, "I'll race walk you down this hallway." No one can resist a race walking challenge. And by the time we got to the end of the hallway, we were both laughing. So I challenge you, as you're working on building your resilience and that persistence muscle, how can you add a little play in the day? Lighten up. Try not to take things so seriously. Accept, avoid, advocate, and play. I hope these videos on pausing, pondering, and persisting help you navigate the challenges of your work. I hope they help you turn some of those challenges into opportunity for impacting your students, into opportunities for your own growth. Here's what I wish for you. I wish for you to find more joy and peace and satisfaction in teaching so that you can stay longer, grow stronger, and keep making an impact. If you enjoyed the Pause, Ponder, and Persist book, I'd be so grateful if you would leave a rating on your favorite bookseller or book review site. You don't even need to write a review. Just click some stars. It helps other readers find the book. And if you enjoyed these videos, please share them with other educators. I'd love to help as many educators as possible. I'm so grateful that you spent this time with me, and I'm so grateful that you do this work. Thank you for the many ways every day you make an impact.